since Vietnam was exposed to industrialization in the late 1980s, which is pretty late if you think of Britain's industrialization in the 18th century. The nation is often viewed as one of the unadvanced countries in the world. However, Vietnam is rising as one of the NICs, which stands for Newly Industrialized Countries, and is experiencing rapid industrialization through more exports and trading. Today, its GDP is rising by 6.8%, in addition to the increase in income. Their approach toward industrialization had started with the development in textile garment industries. It was one of the most developed industries of Vietnam, and from the 1980s, it had helped Vietnam become a more active global trading partner with other Asian countries. The most significant fact about this industry is that it had been the third most exported item in 1993. The fact the secondary industry was able to become one of the most popular export markets shows Vietnam's gradual transformation from having primary industries as their main income sources to now exporting more and more manufactured goods. With the success of VTGF, Vietnam became the NIC, an emerging economic power. So why didn't they start earlier? Well, events in the 1880s and 1900s, such as the French colonization and the Vietnam War, delayed the process. During the colonization, Vietnam had an experience that was similar to the dependent development. Since France used the colony for the exploitation of natural resources, they did not see the necessity to promote industry into the nation. France invested into primary industries of Vietnam such as rice, coal, and rare minerals, and established enterprises in Saigon, Hanoi, and Haiphong. Therefore, during the colonization, Vietnam was not influenced by France's advanced economy and industrialization, but was rather improved on primary industries. However, during that process, France transformed Vietnam's economy close to capitalism for increased production and exports. For the Vietnam War, the nation was divided into two regimes before 1975, and the tension from this division delayed the process of industrialization. Adding on, both regimes depended on foreign countries for their industries as well as technology. Therefore, they did not have independent industries to become the NIC. Unlike the UK that had started the industrialization and pioneered through new methods and inventions, Vietnam was not productive and efficient, for they did not have enough technology and planned out schedules. For example, they did not integrate the textile and garment firms together, which would have made them both part of domestic and external markets. The two regimes also had separate economies. The Democratic Republic of Vietnam traded with their allies and stepped into industrialization by manufacturing uniforms for their army. However, the South preferred tailored cloth and therefore prevented further development in textile garment industries. And after they were united as the Socialist Republic of Vietnam, they had a command economy, meaning that decisions were made by their government. Since Vietnam had to pay back the debt to the Soviet Union, the government made an agreement to export most of their textile and garment products back. Therefore, they had to set up firms in large cities of Vietnam to manufacture garments with Vietnamese fabric. Later, the Six-Party Congress led several economic reforms called the Đói Mồi in 1986, which was a transition from Stalinism to capitalism to develop more manufacturing and trading. Their reforms were basically market-oriented and export-oriented. International conditions suggested export-oriented reform to be appropriate, while the end of repression on private firms developed market-oriented ones. Also, since the government relieved the repression on private sectors and encouraged more private businesses, government was decentralized and privately owned companies were now able to actively engage in the economy. Vietnamese consumers also welcomed these changes since they were introduced to foreign garments and reached higher standard of living, which is also called high HDI. With the new approach in economy, employment structure had also changed over time. Before industrialization, most people were employed in agricultural fields, but since the development of industries and constructions, especially in the 1990s, the rate of employment in agriculture decreased and was shifted toward industries. From 2000 to 2010, the share of industrial employment out of total employment had increased 5% and clearly shows the transformation of Vietnam's economy. The government played an essential role in Vietnam's development. Although the government helped industrialization later on, in the beginning it can be seen that they were hindering the process. They were too powerless compared to foreign countries such as the Soviet Union, so they acted like their puppets, giving them supplies and at the same time copying their industries and losing a chance to develop their own. However, since the government was powerless, it can be seen from a different perspective that this aspect had actually helped Vietnam industrialize. Since the government had to pay back the debt and sign the agreement with the Soviet Union, Vietnam started to produce manufactured goods. If it was not this agreement, industrialization might have been delayed, and primary industries might have stayed dominant. Also, the government had greatly contributed to the economic reforms that took place in 1980s, such as creating hundreds of state import-export corporations with more autonomy in production. Following the industrialization, there were some shifts in population. First of all, compared to the population pyramid in the 1950s, population has shifted toward the middle and has been concentrated in the interval of 25 to 29, while in the 1950s most were in 0 to 4. Based on the 2019 pyramid, Vietnam has a young population today, and life expectancy seems to be increasing. This positive outcome can be said to be caused by the industrialization and development in technology. Of course, there were some consequences that followed industrialization. Due to rapid industrialization, Vietnam was not able to control the environmental consequences that even influence the health of citizens. After the economy was moved to manufacturing from agricultural-based, industry started to produce large amounts of dust and CO2 that were off the limits. Not only the air but also water was severely polluted since there were no functioning wastewater treatment plants. Human health was also affected by pollution, as it can be clearly proven from the fact that 27% of patients were suffering from respiratory infections in 1991. Also, CO2 emissions had increased significantly. However, compared to the US, its rate is pretty low, which indicates the level of development Vietnam is in present situation. Also, Vietnam's emission rate does not increase dramatically, which displays the fact that they are having a sustainable development and considering the effects that extreme manufacturing can lead to. Nowadays, many industries from foreign countries, especially Japan and China, are established in Vietnam. Also, since it resembles much of Japan and China in a way that market forces work, as it can be seen that Doi Moi has been adopted from China, it was chosen to be the new location for foreign markets. More often, Chinese products were chosen over Vietnamese products because of its cheap price and large quantities. These products include motorcycles and clothes. However, when labor costs increased in China, Vietnam was able to increase their share of export market, but not for so long. Vietnam does not have enough supporting industries that would supply the main firm with primary resources. Therefore, the costs are higher than the ones in China. Also, new problems such as increasing consumer prices and labor costs arose. Some people think that Vietnam would in the future, like China, which has shifted to cheaper labor markets, would have a similar experience and have industrialization with cheaper labor costs. After the start of manufacturing and the establishment of foreign industries which took advantage of Vietnam's attractive features, cheap labor was one of the factors that led the economy of Vietnam. However, as countries experienced reforms in labor costs one by one, Vietnam also lost its big appealing feature of cheap labor. Therefore, now it seems like they would not be continuing to have cheaper labor markets, but would gradually head toward having a new strategy such as the service industry. It has the potential to become one of the Asian tigers with this rapid growth of economy and engagements in several free trade markets such as the Korean Free Trade Agreement. GDP will be increasing throughout the years, and Vietnam would focus on industrialization, then turning to cheaper labor markets. However, there can be some delay due to the government since it is very cautious on having sustainable growth and preventing possible consequences. The government is also cautious about reducing red tape and the level of non-performing loan. With this rapid and sustainable development, Vietnam seems to be stepping up to a flourishing economy. After watching this video, did your views on Vietnam change at all?